Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com. Hello, and welcome to the new warehouse. On this episode, we are getting to work, and not the WORK type of work. We are talking all things WERC, otherwise known as the Warehouse Education and Research Council. I'm joined by Assistant Professor and WERC Conference Chair, Jeremy Banta, Will Sparks of Tractor Supply, and Mel Allwood, the SVP and Head of Operations at Sunland Logistics, to discuss everything about WERC and their upcoming conference in June. Listen to learn how WERC has helped them, how it can help you, and all you need to know about the upcoming conference June 2nd through 5th.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
All right. Hello, everybody. I am Kevin Lawton of the New Warehouse Podcast, and thank you for joining us today on this live podcast episode where we're going to be talking all things work, and not the work that you're trying to avoid today, maybe on your lunch break at this time, depending on where you are. But WERC, W-E-R-C. We're going to talk all about WERC. What is WERC? What is their association and their programming? What their mission is, their vision is, and we're also going to talk about their upcoming conference, which will be at the New Warehouse Podcast. We'll be there doing some podcasts, and I'm going to be joined today by three panelists here. I'm joined by Jeremy Banta. He is an assistant professor in supply chain management, and he is also this year's WERC Conference Chair. Will Sparks is the Director of Inventory Planning Systems and Analytics at Tractor Supply Company, and he is the VP of the WERC Advisory Council. And Mel Allwood is the SVP and Head of Operations at Sunland Logistics Solution, and also on the WERC Conference Committee as well. So, Will, Jeremy, Mel, thanks for joining me today. How are you three doing?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Same. Glad to be here.
Definitely happy to get you all three on. Happy to talk about WERC. I think WERC is doing a lot of great things, specifically for the warehouse industry. So for people that aren't familiar what WERC is, and it's WERC, as you can see in the title of the event, that stands for the Warehouse Education and Research Council. And they're specifically focused on the warehouse industry itself, which, you know, I love, right? The New Warehouse Podcast, obviously, self-proclaimed warehouse nerd here, thinking that warehouses are sexy. So definitely happy to be talking about this. And I think they have a great mission and vision. And their mission really is that to help members and their companies to succeed by creating unparalleled learning experiences, networking opportunities, and access to research-driven industry information, which I think is very important to have those networking opportunities and also the learning experiences, which is such a great thing to be able to do. And their vision is to exist to lead the warehousing industry, advance warehousing science, and develop a competitive advantage for both individuals and corporations, which I think as we look at the landscape out there, it's very important to be able to have that and be able to figure out how can you develop that competitive advantage for yourself and personal development, and also for your company and your business as well. So that's the WERC mission and vision from WERC themselves. But I'm interested to hear in our panelists, our speakers here, and kind of their own words, what is work to them personally, and how would they describe it in their own words? So why don't we start with Mel? What is work to you, and how would you kind of describe the organization in your own words?
Thank you. So for me, the real key part of work is the E, it's the education. That is one of the things that I think makes work different. Well, even if you come to the conference, you'll see we're looking at all aspects of supply chain. I also think one of the things that it does is it brings, I can tell you our organization uses the information and data that's accessible through work at MHI frequently. So it brings together education, data, and then to me, most importantly, it looks across all aspects of people serving supply chain. Many times when you're in other professional organizations, they're very targeted, but here work is going across from the practitioner to the people like me that are in 3PL to the providers, and it goes across the supply chain. So for me, it's really an educational focus that looks across holistically of all aspects of the supply chain.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to hear you're able to take advantage of those resources and really see kind of the benefit and the advantage of that. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that data portion in a little bit too. But let's hear from Jeremy. How about you? What is work to you, and how would you describe it in your own words?
So going with what Mel did, I'll pick a letter, the council part. There's a community here, and as an educator, I know it's in my textbooks. I know it's in my classroom curriculum. I know what I can read online, but I know more about Tractor Supply because Will and I have networked multiple times and had like just casual conversations about stuff that's been going on in business. And that happens a lot, especially when you're at a conference where it's education focused and when you're at an event that's education focused. And people are trying to figure out, hey, what are you doing here? Or why do you guys have this? Or what's the function of this piece of equipment? Or how are you solving this problem? It's invaluable because you don't pick that up in texts. You don't pick it up from reading something online. It only happens through one-on-one formal and informal conversations. And that is invaluable to me.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point too, because we look at our industry and, surface level, one could argue that, hey, we're all just moving boxes around, right, in the warehouse. It's going in and out. But there are all these different intricacies depending on what type of product we're dealing with and what type of industry we're servicing and all those different types of things. So it is those kind of individual, I think, interactions like you mentioned there, Jeremy, that kind of help you to understand like, oh, how is somebody else doing this or how is somebody else tackling that? It's not necessarily something you can just kind of get out of nowhere. So getting those connections, I think, is a really great thing. So Will, how about you? Do you want to pick a letter as well out of work? Or stick with it?
Going last, I have the benefit of weaving both Mel and Jeremy's answers into my own answer, right? So, I think the focus on research and education is paramount. We leverage a lot of the materials and content. As a practitioner, I find it very valuable. Kind of keying off what Jeremy said, the networking and social aspect of it. It is so refreshing to be able to engage with different folks from different parts of the supply chain in different functional roles. Some are practitioners or shippers like myself. Others are consultants or even 3PL providers, but there's no inherent pressure to commercialize anything. You're just having a conversation and comparing notes. And I love that part of it. But the one that I guess I would add to the response is development. I think that the conference itself provides a unique opportunity for people who may not otherwise get public speaking experience, or they may not have the opportunity to do public speaking. Our conference, because it is kind of crowdsourced and you're hearing from practitioners and people that do this every day, it gives people an opportunity to really kind of get out of their comfort zone and develop themselves. And then I would add on to that, not just the conference, but also volunteering with work. You're able to find yourself in a role maybe that you don't do every day, and it's refreshing and it just helps with my overall development. And I would encourage anybody to get more involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're going to be a speaker this year, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But yeah, I mean, I think it's such a great thing to be able to have that, like you said, that sharing of thoughts and like Jeremy touched on too, to be able to to do that and create those connections, and also, like you said, put yourself in position where you could do some public speaking, which I think can go a long way in professional development and learning from others that maybe have been in the industry longer, and being able to connect with people that have more experience and kind of figure those things out. So I want to go back to Mel, because I think this is something that's becoming more and more important is around the data aspect. So Mel, you mentioned there about utilizing some of the data that WERC puts out there or facilitates in collection of. Tell us a little bit about that, I guess probably from like a KPI perspective. What kind of data are you able to leverage, and what is WERC providing?
Absolutely. And I've gone blank because you asked me, but we put out the industry's information last year, and we've utilized that quite a bit, whether it's going back and benchmarking our own operations or as we're developing new solutions for new clients. We will go back and make sure that the KPIs, are we in the same realm? Are we looking at things the same way as the industry? And really, it's also very helpful. Many times you may be working with a new practitioner that hasn't had the same experience, and it can give you some ability to say, well, if you want to look at this, here's some ways to view it. I mean, it can be as simple as inventory or more complex, but it gives you that baseline or that kind of that grounding to be able to say, we're doing it correctly, we're proposing it correctly, and frankly, sometimes even to educate other people who we're working with as we start to develop the solutions and the measurements.
Yeah, I think that's such a great thing, because it is sometimes like a question, if you're operating your business or, in the warehouse setting or our 3PL potentially. I mean, how are we doing? Right? Are we doing things the way that other people are doing things the way that they're doing? Are metrics lining up? So being able to create some of those kind of benchmarking aspects and have that resource, I think, is such a powerful thing, just to understand how are we performing versus others? Are we not performing versus others? How do we improve upon that? I'm curious, Will, if you guys have leveraged any of that at Tractor Supply.
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
There's a lot of content available on the WERC website that we have referenced, as a data point in various research activities. I know that something that WERC's done for a long time is the DC Measures survey. So basically just kind of listing out a lot of those key indicators, and, everything is unique. We all have unique supply chains and unique operations, but when you can kind of see, okay, generally speaking, the range or the upper lower limit of this particular metric usually falls in this range. So yeah, there's a lot of general content out there. There's a lot of subjects that are covered. A lot of the prior annual conference content is available on the site. So that's always good to go and research. But then some of the more formal studies are good too as hard data points.
Yeah, definitely a lot of different resources there to be able to leverage and learn from, and even do some of that professional development, as you mentioned earlier too, as well, and also for the organization side too. So I'm curious, Jeremy, I mean, from your side, you're an educator, professor, right? And I'm curious, how do you kind of bring maybe some of those data points or those case studies, research, how do you bring that into the classroom and, get the next generation excited about our industry?
Yeah, it's, being at the community college level, it's a little bit different. If I was at a 4-year academic institution, I could directly use some of those products. But at the community college level, my time's limited. So I encapsulate a lot of what I've pulled from WERC, talk about some of the tools that are out there, but we haven't really necessarily dug into them. However, all the lessons learned get incorporated into class. A lot of the conversations I have get incorporated into class. A lot of the stuff that I pick up, at sessions at the conference, I talk about. So Yeah, it's not necessarily indirectly, but it's a little bit more of a dotted line. The materials that work produces do end up in classrooms, just because some of that stuff is invaluable. I'd love to be able to put my students into some of the databases and have them, play around, but then that means they're not picking up a bunch of other stuff, unfortunately, because our time is limited. But yeah, most of my students are working adults, so bringing information from a work conference or a work session or a meeting, it's stuff that I talk about in class, and they go to work the next day and apply it. So it's very, very cool.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. I mean, it's especially to be able to apply it that quickly. I'm a professor myself, and I'm teaching some younger students, undergrad, and it's interesting, like, bringing those kind of, I guess, real world examples or data points into it. You can see it makes such a difference, and I'm sure you could see even more of a difference if they can apply it the next day and their actual work, their work data points to their work itself, right? Yeah. I think that's such a great thing to be able to do. So we're talking about WERC here, which is the Warehouse Education and Research Council, and really focused on the warehousing industry. And one of the big highlights from WERC is what's coming up here in June, which is the conference, the annual conference itself, which is going to be in Dallas, Texas this year, and starts June 2nd to June 5th. But Jeremy is the conference chair this year, so we're going to lean on Jeremy here a little bit to give us kind of the ins and outs, the details, and the rundown on the conference itself.
Yeah, the conference is fun. I started when it was here in Columbus, Ohio, being asked to be part of the planning. And I guess I did a good job because they asked me to join the organization formally. And I guess I'm doing okay because they keep asking me to do more and more stuff. And I love it. And as an educator, it's kind of a fun place to be in, to be that conference chair. I'm excited to bring back stuff that I learned and talk about the conference. I mean, I'm already talking about it now, but talk about it in the classroom will be a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I went for the first time to the WERC conference last year. And I mean, it was such a great gathering of just warehouse professionals, that want to learn from each other, want to learn from the sessions. And the sessions were, super full of knowledge and very like insightful too. And some very interestingly like specific topics that I think are really impactful or really top of mind for warehouse professionals, which I think is a great thing compared to some other like supply chain conferences you go to, and there's a more broader supply chain focus. And I think that's such a great thing for our industry to be able to have and be able to see that and have that kind of education point, because it's kind of like, wow, we're all in the same boat versus like maybe, we're one half we're talking about procurement, the other half we're talking about manufacturing. This is fully warehouse focused, which I think is a great thing. Will, what about your thoughts for the upcoming conference? You're going to be a speaker. Why don't you give us kind of your perspective on what the conference is like and maybe what people can expect from you in your speaking session as well?
Yeah, Kevin, I think you hit the nail on the head with the comment around very specific content being delivered. The focus is within the four walls of the warehouse, but even within that limited scope, there's just so much to talk about. I mean, between people, process, technology, the agenda or the programming is already full of really, really good sessions that I'm looking forward to attending. But on the speaking part, we have a couple different types of sessions. One is called a thought leader session, and the other one's more of a peer-to-peer, where the group, instead of it being like an audience lecture style, it's more of you sit, the chairs are kind of in a semicircle and everyone just kind of talks and shares their own experience. Those are really engaging and really fun to kind of participate in. One of the topics that I get the opportunity to lead during this year's conference is around the practical use case of machine learning inside forecasting. It's a big topic for me to try to tackle because there are experts out there that are, machine learning engineers and data scientists. So I'm going to kind of come at it from a different angle. I'm going to say, look, there's a lot going on right now in the industry, this explosion of AI and machine learning kind of post-COVID. It can be overwhelming. So let's break it down into sort of plain English terms and talk about what it is, what it isn't, and how companies are using it to improve the accuracy of their forecasts, which is exactly what we're doing at Tractor Supply.
Interesting, and definitely a top of mind topic on the machine learning and AI has certainly been, something that's driving a lot of discussion all around. And I will agree with you. I mean, I think those sessions that you mentioned, the peer-to-peer sessions, is something that I noticed last year when I was at the conference. I mean, I tried to make it over to one, and they were like, "Oh, we're full. Like, we can't fit any more people in the room," which I think kind of is a testament to the popularity there. And I think that's a really great thing. I mean, I'm curious, Will, kind of on the same topic there around the machine learning and things like that. I mean, what type of things do you think are top of mind for people coming to the conference this year? What topics are really kind of I guess pushing and really of interest of potential attendees?
Yeah, I think when it comes to distribution, execution, labor and automation is always top of mind, increasingly so. I think people are trying to find that right balance. When does it make sense to automate versus when does it make sense to maybe invest in performance management, engineered labor standards, those sorts of things. So coming to the conference with an open mind for it, like you probably already have in your head, like what you're investing in or what you plan to invest in, but just hearing all the different perspectives from not just the speakers in the peer-to-peer sessions, but just in the hallways, getting coffee, kind of rubbing shoulders with people that are like-minded and trying to solve the same problems as you, super valuable. So I would definitely say the whole labor component is going to be big again this year. I think another thing that is going to be talked about quite a bit this year is just the emphasis on sustainability and ESG. It's a topic that all companies are grappling with, how to make it real, how to make it impactful. And I think that this type of forum, the WERC annual conference, is just a great way to kind of, just do some informal research on what other groups are doing, and in the spirit of sharing, just kind of compare notes on how people are attacking sustainability.
Interesting. Yeah. I think that's definitely a big topic as well. I've been seeing more kind of sustainable solutions and options coming into the market as well too, which I think is a very interesting and good thing for us overall, and not only in the industry but society. I mean, if you think about our industry, we certainly have a big impact on the contributions there from the different types of supplies and products that we use. I think just it was yesterday I saw some kind of paper-based, fully recyclable pallet wrap, which I thought was pretty cool. So definitely a great topic to be focused on and trying to learn from there. I'm curious, Mel, from your side, not only from being a part of the conference committee, but also, part of a 3PL too, and Sunland Logistics. What's kind of top of mind for you? What are you looking to get out of the conference and learn?
Well, I'm going to first put on my conference committee hat a bit and say one of the
Sure.
things that impressed me about WERC, so this is my second year serving, my third year being part of this, was that there's a lot of mindfulness in trying to make sure we are getting the right mix of topics and the right mix of type of speaking. So as as Will already spoke about, we do thought leaders and then the peer-to-peer both get great reviews every year. But then we go in and we do try to make sure we're being very balanced, because again, that's one of the things that WERC is I think a strength as a professional organization, is across such a wide variety of attendees. So we do want to make sure we're being balanced and balancing not only from topics, but also from the people that are attending, making sure that we have really something that will be meaningful for everyone. And one of the things that really I had not experienced until WERC was the peer-to-peer. And it is such a great opportunity for people that maybe aren't comfortable being a thought leader yet, but who have quite a bit to bring and knowledge to share, to get that chance to interact within the group. We learn quite a bit. I try to participate in those as much as I can. And really interesting thing, and so many people come away with really feeling like that not only they contributed, but they were able to learn things in those sessions that they could take immediately back into what they were doing on a day-to-day. I think that, I think also Will and Jeremy both spoke. We do see quite a bit around labor. automation, but also in this market, how do you attract? I think labor is top of mind across the industry. But then also, like I just made a note, I definitely want to sign up for Will's session because I'm very interested in how AI is also going to change how we approach our future and what benefits we can get to it when we get over being nervous about it.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's definitely something that's top of mind for a lot of people. And I mean, it's great to hear too, how you, from the committee chair perspective, I mean, how you kind of go about being able to develop the content and put that together. And I'm curious, maybe this is a question for all three of you, or maybe it's for Jeremy and Mel. I mean, what is kind of the process to develop that content? Because I mean, obviously there's a lot of members. I think there's about 900 plus members, I think I saw, for WERC. And from the industry, are you going out and asking, like, what do you want to hear about? How do you kind of research and curate this content for the conference?
Yeah, it's a good process. So this is my, oh my gosh, I think my 5th year. And, we start by pulling in volunteers that have, raised their hand or expressed interest in being part of the planning process. And then we look at what happened at the last conference, the last couple conferences, what sessions were highly attended, which ones maxed out, what peer-to-peer sessions were really, really interesting. And then look at what are some of the current trends? What are we seeing in the media? What are we hearing from our individual members? Where have things shifted? What has grown? What's new? And then we'll open up the floodgates for people that want to present. And then we'll take all of those and assess them based on content, based on if they've presented before, if it's a similar topic, if it matches up to what's going on in the industry, and kind of curate the conference based on kind of current events and what people want to know. And then we'll look for holes. So I think that's how Will got volunteered for the AI type of stuff. It's like, hey, we need to talk about this more. And we didn't really get any proposals on this. And I can't remember if Will's like, hey, I can talk about that. Or I'll do a session on this. But that's kind of how we figure it out. And then, once in a while we'll get a session. We're like, oh, that's a good one. And that's gonna make hallway conversations. That needs to be a peer-to-peer as well. And so a lot of times you'll see somebody present on a topic, and then the very next round of sessions, they'll have a peer-to-peer to kind of continue that conversation, but on a broader scale. And those are the ones that end up being like the most exciting and the ones that are usually capped because it's good conversation and everybody wants to jump in and get involved.
And if I can add to that, it's a very thoughtful process. We spend pre-work going through, making notes, but then we come together. And so it's not like, Mel gets 6 things and I say, yes, no. We all bring our feedback into, obviously, Jeremy and Chris come in with the knowledge from the previous conference, but then we really go through as a team, pros and cons. Sometimes it's, hey, this is good, but if they go back and they add this, it would be better. So we also then go back and work with the thought leaders or the peer-to-peer leaders to round out or to help make the presentation stronger or maybe a little bit more on point, so that we're very committed to making sure the conference has good content. I mean, I think all of us that serve on the committee, and certainly all the people that volunteer to present, are very committed to making this a meaningful conference.
Yeah. And I think it is such a meaningful thing. And I know from my experience last year, as I mentioned for the first time, I was very, very impressed with the sessions and kind of the focus areas too as well. I thought they were very top of mind, but also very geared towards, like I said, that warehouse professional and things that, we're definitely concerned about or definitely want to learn more about or increase our knowledge base. I'm curious there, Jeremy, you mentioned the hallway conversations, which I think is a really good thing to point out, because that is a lot of times where some of the most value sometimes comes out of some of these conferences, where you have these conversations and, you go back to the development and learning from each other. I think you towards the C there, the council, right, and being able to connect with people. Tell us a little bit about how kind of you go about as a committee trying to facilitate that network and maybe kind of stoke the flames of hallway conversations a little bit.
The first thing that pops to mind is the social activities that are planned. So each evening there will be like kind of a mass gathering. And of course, there's, snacks and drinks provided. And there's usually a theme that relates to whatever city that we're in. And that starts the conversations. I mean, they naturally happen in the hallways anyway, but the kind of the social offerings get people in one big room, and you see somebody that you saw in another session, or somebody that was a speaker. And you're like, hey, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this. Or people come up and say, hey, you're the committee chair, or you're on this. Tell me more about this topic. And then someone else kind of joins the group, and it turns into more and more conversations. And then we also kind of pay attention, at least I do, to what I'm hearing, what people are talking about, so I can bring that back for the next year and go, man, there was a lot of people talking about this particular session. We need to either repeat that or make sure we do something like it again, just because people talked about that like the entire time we were there.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think I want to say that I remember I did that to you last year, Jeremy. I came up to you after your session, right? Yeah, exactly what you're saying there. Will and Mel, how about you? How do you feel about kind of the networking and maybe some, advice to get the most out of the in-between session conversations? What do you find works well?
Yeah, I think the way that the conference is set up, for those that have never been to a WERC conference, it's not like a trade show where there are thousands and thousands of people marching around like ants, all on their individual missions. It's really intimate. It's like, in sort of the conference section of a hotel, you can almost kind of see everybody at one time, especially during breaks and at lunch and coffee, those sorts of things. So it's easier to bump into people. It's easier to approach people. Everyone's wearing a lanyard with a name tag and kind of what they do. So I've found in my years going to the conference that people are very open to just striking up conversations. And, if you're kind of a shy person, then maybe, doing that sort of in one of the peer-to-peer sessions and then building off of a comment. Hey, I heard you make this comment in the peer-to-peer. I'd like to know more about that, and then introduce yourself. But yeah, it's very intimate, and everyone has been super friendly. Every conference I've ever been to, doesn't matter kind of what role you have or what industry you're representing specifically, everyone seems to be open to just sharing ideas and talking about things that matter to all of us. So yeah, it's a great experience, and I would encourage people to go with an open mind.
That's great advice. Yeah. I think it is too. Like you said, it's a little different than some of the, big, larger trade shows, like you said, where there's a mission, right, and all those things, and kind of calling back to what I mentioned earlier about some of the shows out there where it's a more broader supply chain focus, right? You might strike up a conversation with somebody, run into somebody, and they're in a different part of the supply chain that maybe isn't necessarily as much as what you're focused on or interested in. And here, I mean, it's everybody's here like for the warehouse, which I think is very, very exciting for me personally, definitely, because I'm all about the warehouse. But Mel, how about from your side? What are some of your past experiences or advice on how to get the most out of the conference?
Well, I guess I'm a poster child for the benefit of networking at WERC. That's how I joined Sunland. Was directly through networking from my first session I presented in the first year I attended. So I certainly can tell you there's great benefits to networking and the ability to network. And I think what Will said is really important. It's not a huge conference. It's one of the things I literally, day one that night, said, hey, I want to volunteer. I want to be part of this the first year I attended, because it is really focused on what we do, but also the people that do it. And it's just the right size. We have great keynote speakers. We have great booths set up from different vendors, but really the focus is on what we can learn from each other, formally or informally. And to me, the size, I've never been to one that it was so comfortable just to get to know people and engage across the entire conference spectrum. The after hours and the socials are great. It gives you the opportunity to kind of meet and mingle. But I think even just coming out of each of the sessions, people are really wanting to talk about what they just experienced. And then that drives, to your point earlier, that hallway conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. And it's great to hear too your positive experience there, how you ended up at Sunland Logistics from that networking. I think that's a great testimony we could say live here. And then Jeremy, why don't you kind of give us kind of all the details of the event, like when, where, what's the best time to fly in, what's the best time to be there to prepare and make sure you get the most out of all the sessions?
Well, so June 2nd through the 5th of this year, Dallas, Texas, as you said. Because we're smaller, we're able to have a little bit more compact area. So we're in the Hilton Anatole. And I mean, of course, I'm going to say come for the entire thing.
Yeah.
But it's always good to come in the night before so that you can kind of look through the conference sessions. If you haven't already done that, figure out what you want to do. A lot of groups come in and will have their own little like social activities prior to or along with, as well as the formal planned ones. We wrap up the last day with a keynote and optional tours if you want to do that. So we usually have some pretty cool places to go to. Last year, I went to the Toyota material handling factory where they're building forklifts. Absolutely awesome to see. So coming for the whole time really, really helps. And we've actually changed things a little bit to make the tours at a different time. We noticed that in the past, the tours would conflict with people's travel schedule. So we've altered that last day this year so that you can still go on a tour and then also still have plenty of time to get to the airport, make your plane, and get your flight home. So trying to maximize everybody's time as much as possible is something that the conference planning committee works on. So yeah, it's definitely worth coming in the day before the conference starts and staying through the end.
Gotcha. And yeah, those facility tours are definitely a cool option. But I did pull it up here. It looks like, so we have, and these are on Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., right, is what I see. But we have Edward Don and Company, which is food service, equipment, and supplies as a facility tour. Mariner, which is a newer facility in 2022, all around e-commerce fulfillment. Henry Schein, oh wow, which is a huge facility, 810,000 square feet, 157 dock doors, facility controlled. That sounds like a really cool one, actually. And then Lennox International as well at the airport, which is 500,000 square feet, which is, oh wow, will be brand new, actually just opened or was scheduled to open on March 15th. So that would be a really cool one to see brand new. And then Northern Tool and Equipment as well, which services retail stores and e-commerce orders as well. So definitely try and take advantage of those facility tours. I love a good facility tour. I'll have to decide which one of those do I want to do. Interesting.
Yeah, that makes it tough.
Yeah.
It's a good list. And I will tell you, I've been in hundreds of facilities. It's one of the things I do here locally is to go out and visit people. And I feel I do that more often than most people. And I can't tell you the last time I went into a facility and didn't learn something new. There's a new way of doing something. There's a new piece of equipment. There's something that's unique about the business. You're like, I never thought about that. Yeah, those facility tours are invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find the same. And I think that goes back to the point we made earlier about, just mutual kind of sharing and learnings from each other. It's one thing, we can pick things up in conversation, but when we see how other people are doing things too, we can glean some little tips and tricks from that too. But before we close out, why don't we go around here and kind of everybody give their top conference tip and how to get the most out of a conference. So Will, why don't you start your top tip for a conference?
Yeah, sure. If you're interested in the warehousing industry, distribution centers, logistics, all of the above, and of course we all are, I would encourage at the end of the conference, they're going to go around and they're going to ask if you specifically have an interest in annual conference, if you'd like to get involved there. And just like Jeremy and Mel, I did that some years ago. And it has given me back way more than I've given it. So definitely would encourage folks to stick around and fill their name out when that card goes around.
All right, great tip. So definitely volunteer, get involved. Mel, how about you? Top conference tip?
Yeah, so I'm going to give my pro tip is use the app. There's a great app that we use, and you can sign up for your sessions. It helps you know where it is, what time it starts, kind of gives you a schedule. The other thing that I'm going to ask on behalf of the conference committee is please fill out the reviews. we really use those to understand what content resonated, what was meaningful, what we may need to tweak. So, and you do that directly in the app. So as soon as you get to the conference or before, download the app. That will help you look at all the sessions that are available and the times and be able to help you plan your schedule. And then after you get done with the attending the various peer-to-peer thought leaders, providing that feedback is very valuable to us for planning next year's conference.
Nice. Powerful app. Love to use the technology. Great tip. And Jeremy, our final tip for today to get the most out of the conference?
It's a twofer. The first one is, if you think a session looks really exciting, get there early so you can get a good seat or a seat. But the other one is pay attention to your surroundings and who you're sitting near. I rarely go to a conference where I'm in a session listening to a speaker, and in the next session, I'm sitting next to them in the session. Our speakers come for the entire conference. It's not one of those places where they come in just to speak and leave. That rarely happens, and it's usually because they have some mission critical thing. The speakers that come are part of the conference. They're there to learn too, and you get one-on-one time sometimes with the speakers. You may end up sitting next to them in a session. So yeah, pay attention to who's around you, because you could strike up some amazing conversations. And like Mel, you could end up with a new job.
That would be great, right? In some cases. So great tips from all three of you, and great insights to hear, not only into work, but the upcoming conference as well. So I want to thank the three of you for joining, and thanking everybody for tuning in and listening along as well. But if you want to learn more about the WERC conference, head to werc.org, and you should be able to find all the information there. As Jeremy said earlier, it's on June 2nd through 5th in Dallas, Texas, and the New Warehouse podcast will be in the building as well. So we hope to see everybody there. So Jeremy, Mel, and Will, thank you once again for joining me today. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.